It is day two of 21 days of wellness with the wellness professor Leo Simpson II. And not that I'm important, but wellness is, let me just tell you the absolute truth. Being well, right, is so profound. And over these next 21 days, it is our intention, absolute intention, to position people. Listen to me carefully. Listen to me carefully. Position people to replace chaos, frustration, confusion in work, in family, in identity with wellness. Because the truth is, every problem, I talk about this in my problem solving and decision making class at the college that I teach at. And I want to talk about that throughout the course of this 21 days. Before I talk about that specific piece, it's so important that we understand that problems such as chaos, frustration, confusion in their various forms, they indicate that wellness is possible, right? And in the indicating that wellness is possible, those frustrations, the chaos, the confusions are really designed to activate in us the awarenesses of the possibility of wellness and the ability to pursue it. All right. And so, really, one of the things that I teach in my problem solving and decision making class is the reality of every problem brings its solution with it. Every problem brings its solution with it. And so when you understand very well, and I talked about this yesterday, when you understand very well the problem, then it really positions you to understand very well the solution, right? And so if you understand that every problem brings its solution with it, every time a problem comes, every time some type of frustration, every time some type of confusion, every time some type of chaos shows up, the wellness shows up with it. Okay. And so, one of the reasons that people have a hard time solving problems is because they give so much attention and focus to the problems rather than the attention and focus to the clues that the problems are bringing for them to identify their solution. And so, one of the keen aspects when we coach clients and we deal with various different issues and whatnot with those we work with is to position them to really not focus on the problem or amplify the problem. It is to isolate it in such a way to where it yields to you the solution. And so when it comes to wellness at its core, it is so important that we understand that wellness is an element of necessary pursuit and desire, and we need our problems and solutions in order to indicate the value of our wellness, right? And so, one of the things I want to talk about today is, why is doing for others doing for self, right? Why is it that we can operate in the thought process of doing for others is doing for self and get value from it, right? And it sounds like a catch 22 in some regards. It sounds like it's something that may actually not be so, sensible. But what I really want to make sure people understand in this 21 days is the greatest way you can get wellness is to give wellness to somebody else, right? I want to emphasize it. And the place that I really got this perspective about doing for others is doing for self, which then breaks into the awareness of being consistent in meeting the needs of someone who cannot help themselves and cannot do back for you, which really gets into certain wise statements from people like Solomon, King Solomon, who was the third king of Israel. And one of the things about the perspective that he communicated is this: Solomon, in today's financial measures, was a multi-billionaire, and for all intents and purposes was very likely a multi-trillionaire, with the manner in which his financial substance was of, you know, I can't even put it into words. But how can you be somebody who had keen insight and a mind as limitless as the sands of the seashore and not be someone of profound wealth? It's just not possible, right? So anyway, one of the things that I came to understand is that this man, Solomon, was so profoundly wise in his business dealings that he was absolutely keen in making sure he facilitated the aspects of giving to the poor. Let me give you an example how I know this. So I don't know how familiar you are with the systems of the ancient Hebrews as it pertains to their sacrificial laws and their strategies once they actually came out of Egypt, and then they found themselves wandering in the wilderness for about 40 years, or sojourning, if you will, in the wilderness for about 40 years. Here's what is so powerful about the experience that they had. This people group, they were given a law to institute among themselves called the law of tithing, right? And the law of tithing was to be specific to their tribes. And so there were 12 sons of Jacob who became Israel as far as the name that he went by. And those 12 sons were then given inheritance in the land of Canaan when they actually went in to conquer it, all those types of things. Now, one of the things I want to make sure you're clear is among them, Moses was moved to institute a structure among his family lineage, the Levites, where only the Levites would not be able to acquire property or have any inheritance of land in the land of Canaan. And the Levites, they had two classifications in the context of the Levites. And what happened was the Levites had, okay, everybody who's a Levite, they are going to be the ministers and the servants of the worship and the tabernacle that was set up and all those types of things. And then, watch this, Aaron, Moses' brother, they would be the priest, right? So the Levites holistically would be the ministers to serve the things as it pertains to the tabernacle and all that kind of stuff. But the priests who would actually engage in the spiritual worship and the actual facilitation of sacrifices in a certain way, all that kind of stuff, they had to be specifically of the lineage of Aaron. So they had to be a son of Aaron in order to actually be a priest. Okay. Specifically, the tithing system and the offerings that they would bring from the 11 brother sibling tribes would actually then be given to the Levites, right? But here's why. It would be given to the Levites because they were not positioned to have an inheritance as well as the others. They couldn't engage in commerce. They couldn't create businesses. They couldn't offer services outside of that which was specific to their religious worship, all that type of stuff. I mean, it was absolute. And this was an everlasting covenant. Now watch this. This is why I bring it up. I bring it up because in the context of the giving of the tithes to the Levites, it was first and foremost to provide for the Levites because they could not provide for themselves. They couldn't work. They couldn't have inheritance. They couldn't work land or anything of that nature. But then the Levites would then be in a position to where they would have to, of what they receive, provide for those who couldn't take care of themselves. So the poor, the destitute, the stranger, the widows, the fatherless, like they were responsible outside of where other people could actually support those needs to actually support them. And there were certain years that they would do that in the course of a 7-year period, all that. All right. Now here's why I bring that up. As long as this people group, the Israelites, the Hebrews, would facilitate that system well, they would see their environment, their economy, their collaborations be profoundly valuable. So much and so, there was one of their prophets that actually spoke about them being cursed with a curse because they were actually not giving their tithing according to their system. Why? Because here's what happens when you fail to give to someone who's not able to help themselves and do generously for them in a way that you cannot receive back from them. What happens is you actually distinguish yourself to not only be greater, but you position yourself to be inhumane. Wow. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because specifically, I'm talking about why doing for others is doing for self. All right. Here's why doing for others is so powerful and is so beneficial that we need to do. Look at it from this perspective. Some people would say, okay, Leo, if you want wellness, give wellness. That means that if I want to be well in my body, then I need to help somebody else be well. Well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. But what if I have cancer, Leo, and that person has cancer, and I contribute to that person being well? What about me? You see, you can't think about it that way. Why? Because the moment you think that way, you miss out on activating the vulnerability and the generosity and the compassion. Now, let me share this with you. One of the powers of doing for others is because it puts you in a position of compassionate generosity, right? I'm going to come back to my scenario that I'm giving, but doing for others puts you in a position of compassionate generosity. And why is that why is that powerful? Why is that valuable? Why is it pivotal? It's so influential because when you engage in compassionate generosity, you remind yourself that at the end of your life, but while you're living your life, you can't take anything with you that you have. I love how Denzel Washington says it. He said, "You've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse." Now, don't get me wrong. You can leave the stuff to your children, to your spouse, to the next generations and all of that. That's good. You're supposed to do that. But here's what you got to understand. When you have the commitment to be compassionately generous on a day-to-day basis to people who seem like they do not deserve it because they might have made some stupid decisions or they might have found themselves on some hard times or whatever the case may be, what you are actually saying is, I understand that no matter how much I leave to my family, there is nothing I can take with me. I love to ask people the question. I kind of mentioned this yesterday about, no, I didn't. This was in something else I was doing. You know, I often ask people when I talk about family, business, life mastery, and specifically debunking the whole idea of work-life balance, I always ask the question, have you had somebody pass away in your life, right? And that person who passed away in your life, can they work? Well, no. Why not? Because they don't have life. That's correct. So if they don't have life and that keeps them from working, that means work is essentially synonymous to life. Yes, absolutely. So if work is essentially synonymous to life, that means work-life balance cannot work, right? Why? Because you have to have two elements and they must be in opposition in order to have some opposing force so that they can balance, all that good stuff. But here's the thing. The fact that they cannot work in this environment puts them in a position to where any of the rewards and benefits of this environment are not available to them. Right? Here's what I'm saying. Not being in this environment, not having life, passing away positions you to where you can't even exhibit compassionate generosity. Right? In other words, compassionate generosity. Something's wrong with my connection. Oh, I think we're back now. Okay. Compassionate generosity is a fundamental value of human nature. They're finishing up our fences back there. So if you hear some sounds, that's what it is. Okay. So going back to the compassionate generosity, going back to why doing for others is doing for self, going back to if you want wellness, give wellness. Here's what you've got to realize. There's nothing in our lives that can position us to be valuably foundational, solid in what we do if we are not doing for others who cannot do for themselves and cannot do back for us. Because that builds us up in a level of true care and humanity that nothing else can actually give us, right? And so when it comes down to it, I'll give you an example. We have an effort called Transform Kids' Minds. And in this effort, it's focused on helping kids to develop a mindset where they can actually protect themselves from bullies for the purpose of actually preventing suicide and staying off of the path of crime that leads them to prison. Okay. And the main element, watch this, the main element of this Transform Kids' Minds effort is actually encouragement. Now, why encouragement? There's been a plethora of research done that communicates that that encouragement has the greater ability to influence graduation success, progressiveness in their future, positioning them to deal with challenges and overcome difficulties in a way that nothing else can. Now listen to me well. We have, since I was even in elementary, I remember this, we had DARE. I can't remember what DARE stands for. I think it's drug awareness. I can't remember what it was, but DARE, where it was talking about, drug awareness and helping people to, focus on it and focus away from it. And I get it. But here's what I realized. How can you really be focused on, well, watch this. How can you really be focused on helping people to move away from the thing that's hurtful when you have a focus on the thing that's hurtful? For example, can we be anti-drugs? Yes. Is it good to be against drugs? Because anti is against, right? So is it good to be anti-drugs? Yes. Is it good to be anti-suicide? Yes. Is it good to be anti-crime? Is it good to be anti-prison? Yes. All those different things. Anti-frustration, anti-chaos, all the things that are bad. Yes. However, if my program is focused on being anti-drugs, guess what we're going to talk a lot about? Guess what we're going to speak a lot about? We're going to speak about drugs. Guess what we're going to give a lot of our focus to? Drugs. Instead of giving a lot of focus and energy to the thing that is in opposition to drugs that we really should give more of our attention to. Why? Because what you're anti versus what you're pro is still a matter of what you focus on, right? So my point is, if we are watch this, if we're anti-drugs and anti-suicide, anti-crime and anti-prison, in and of itself, that's not bad, but our focus is on the thing we're against. If we shift and say, okay, our focus, and we're putting the focus for the kids on pro encouragement, meaning positioning them to focus on encouraging. Meaning when they see somebody who's dealing with drugs, instead of trying to fight the idea of drugs, you fight the idea of encouraging what is most valuable for them, giving them some frameworks that they can see as a context of encouragement. That's a huge aspect of wellness. Why? Because today kids are more likely on the trajectory to be in prison, to be on the streets, to be doing drugs, to be engaging in crime that leads to prison, and dealing with mental issues that cause them to actually be in a position to where they are literally pursuing suicide as an option more than anything. So, why is it powerful that if I do for these kids and help them to get wellness of mindset, how is that going to help me? Here's how it's going to help me. The more I emphasize that which is going to be of value and benefit for their wellness, in order to even emphasize that and give attentiveness to it, I have to develop myself and have to be developed in order to emphasize it. Did you catch that? Yes. See, when you focus on the wellness of someone else being accessed, it makes you become more in tune, focused, and intentional about the wellness yourself, to where you begin to conform to the idea of the pursuit and the intangible access of that wellness. That's what it is. Wellness is something that when you give it to somebody else, you can't help but to get it because you become so in tune with it. Watch this. The other aspect is when you give the wellness in a profound manner. Listen to me carefully. When you give the wellness in a profound manner with compassionate generosity, you can't help it but have the desire to do it again. For example, if because of the fact, man, let me just give it to you this way. Oh man, just the thought kind of got me excited. When you give, when you are consistent and meeting the needs for those who cannot help themselves and cannot do back for you, what happens is it makes you so excited to go do whatever you did to acquire what you were able to give to that person. Let's say it's money for food, or let's say you help that person get off the streets, or you help that person get some clothes. I'll tell you this quick story real quick. There's a guy that I was riding down the road one day, and I was kind of looking for somebody. I was looking for somebody that would catch my attention. And this guy caught my attention just looking at him off distance. And I was like, all right, I need to position myself to actually get in front of this guy and be where I can, actually connect with him. Position myself. And then as I was positioning myself, I realized that this guy had on one shoe. And what I had in my hand to give him, what I had already intended to give him, not only could he go buy two shoes, one pair of shoes, he probably could have bought maybe two pair of shoes and still had enough to get him something to eat. Okay. Here's what I want to share with you. The fact that I was able to put something on his feet, it could have been just the encouragement he needed in order to get him to where he needed to go to maybe get the solutions that he probably was seeking for. He might have it in his mind. I don't know, but just, you never know. He probably had it in his mind. If I could just give me a good pair of shoes, then I can get to here. I didn't know that was the case. I don't even know if that was the case, but giving that substance. So giving that example, being able to give that substance and position that man to be able to have not only maybe a pair of shoes or maybe two pair of shoes plus some food and whatever else he wanted to get with what he received, that caused me to say, what is it now that I can do to be able to do that, not only for him, but for so many others on a grander scale? Now watch this. Some people say, Leo, why don't you just start a nonprofit? That's because that's not the point. The point is to engage in a regard of compassionate generosity in the context of the movement about your day. And so being able to make sure that in the movement of your day, you are focused on being able to meet needs and see the presence of needs around you. That helps you to understand that you are not so missing from being among humanity. Here's the reality. We have gotten so focused on making sure our bottom lines are solid. And listen, I can talk about this. I got an accounting degree. I've worked in business in various respects, worked for Fortune companies, worked for small businesses, helped small businesses to go from bad years to good years, from, to overcome or transition from partner buyouts and all that kind of stuff. So I can talk about the numbers, but also I know how to deal with financial statements. I've helped to prepare them, as well as I have positioned myself to be able to teach it, which is more exciting to teach it when people can get an understanding of it. I love helping people understand accounting. Anyway, let me get off of that. Well, when it comes down to it, the nonprofit piece, it puts you in a position to where you are focused on the metrics that are approved by the authority that gave you the approval to do what you do, Internal Revenue Service, right? The Internal Revenue Code, right? But when you are operating in the context of your day and you're focused on, the bottom line, making sure you're hitting the numbers, and don't get me wrong, those things are important. Making sure you're dealing with, your budgets, and your variances are within the context of that's what's appreciative and appropriate and preferred, and the stakeholders are satisfied, and all those different things. And you get so engulfed in that. What happens is, when you get so engulfed in that, you can become humanely mechanical. Ooh, what's that, Leo? Humanely mechanical. It is to where you are in human nature, but you're operating more in a mechanical, mundane way. And you're not able to engage what makes us who we are. It is the fact that we can have the emotions. Animals can actually sense those things, but they don't have the ability to put terminology to it. They don't have the ability to put intelligence and intellect and connection. Oh, my connection was having some issues again. When we're able to engage in giving to those, being committed consistently to giving to those who cannot help themselves. And for example, like the situation with the kids, right? It doesn't have to be somebody is physically hungry, right? Kids right now are hungry to understand and know their worth and value. And them not knowing their worth and value is causing them to actually be taken advantage of by various different elements to be pulled in directions that actually don't give them worth or value. It actually helps to diminish their worth and value and perceptively give them a belief that they have none, right? And so when you focus on efforts like that and you seek to provide pro-encouragement efforts, you seek to provide value where you're meeting that need, it helps you to key in on the fact that you need that even more. It reminds you how much of a place of benefit and value you are in, to where you do not, listen to me carefully, you do not have to succumb to that. Or you may have remembered what it was like to be there. Listen, let me tell you something. I have been poor in my life. Okay. And there were situations and decisions that I made that put me in that place to where that happened. And I didn't really understand what it was that I was really learning and discovering. But I discovered that it is a profound encouragement when someone expresses compassionate generosity to you and positions you to be able to receive something that you lack, and you're not in a position in that moment to actually do for yourself, to overcome. It gives you this sense of, man, I can make it to that next point. Not to mention, I've been an encourager of people for a number of years, and I've always heard it from people that when they are encouraged, it gives them that little bit of leveling up that they needed to know that what they're doing is valuable. See, let me just really get down to it. Why is doing for others doing for self? It's because when you do for others, you remind yourself that you not only could have been there, you might have been there, but if you're not careful and situations are what they are, you could actually be there. And you positioning yourself to actually extend compassionate generosity by doing for others when you could just focus on doing for yourself. But instead of doing that, you say, hey, doing for others is doing for self, and that's what I'm going to engage in. What you position yourself, like one of the Proverbs of Solomon, he said, let me see if I can find it real quick. Going back in my coffers in my mind, he that hides his ears from the cry of the poor, his cry will not be heard when it is that he actually cries, or his cry also should not be heard when he makes his cry. There's two ways you want to look at this. If you got something valuable that you're trying to provide and promote, that's a cry. And though it's a valuable solution for other people, you are likely not going to be heard. Why? Because there's something within it that speaks selfishness. Yeah. But then let's say one day this person actually becomes poor, they have a need, whatever the need is, that person is going to be in a difficult place, because when they had the ability to hear the cry, to keep an open ear to the cry of others, they failed to do so, and now they're crying, and it's going to be difficult for them to be heard. Why? Because there's a law called cause and effect, sowing and reaping, right? And so, growing up, I remember the way it used to be said, what goes around comes around. What goes in comes back. And so the truth of the matter is, when it comes to wellness, we've got to understand being well, having the state of being well is something that not only we should have or something we should pursue, but we should always seek to extend it, right? If you see somebody in a difficult position, it's easy for us to judge the reality of why they are where they are. Or we can actually just focus on being compassionately generous in an exponential and profound way, and not only watch it transform them, watch it benefit us. I'll say this and then I'll get out of here. Here's the last thing. The truth of the matter is that when you think about Solomon, who said these words, who penned these words, I love to say this. This man had people from all over the nations of his time coming to him for his keen insight and his limitless mind. And they compensated him well. I told you that maybe I didn't tell you, it's in one of my other pieces of content called the Hidden Billionaire Success Strategy, revealed, by the way. Anyway, one of the account or the transactions of gold that he received was 120 talents, which in today's money is over $250 million. It's one transaction. And that was not the only time that he received that. He received that multiple times. Now, there was recorded at least two that I saw specifically, but there were other times that he received that same amount, which indicates from, a research perspective that if two people of various nations related to something of a commercial nature gave that to him, that was very likely his agreed upon price. That was his stated receiving amount. That was his posting. Nobody questioned giving that, because even one of the people who gave him 120 talents gave him more than that. She gave him spices. She gave him, I think there was oils as well and some other things. And I mean, the spices were probably as much or more in value as the gold itself because of the amount, the vastness of it. Here's what I need you to understand. This man knew what he was talking about, because he never lacked. And he said, he that giveth to the poor shall not lack. Now, this is why I brought up that tithing system early on. This was really the main reason I wanted to share it. When Solomon became king, he actually offered 1,000 burnt offerings. Listen to me carefully. 1,000 burnt offerings in the context of that system. Those burnt offerings would actually then be given to the Levites to facilitate. So in other words, we saw in that example him being abundant. He didn't just give 10. He could have just given 10. He could have just given 1. He gave 1,000 burnt offerings. And that wasn't the only time he gave abundant burnt offerings. What's the point? This man knew what he was talking about when he said, "He that giveth to the poor shall not lack." In other words, those of you who are consistent in meeting the needs of others, who cannot do for themselves, meeting the needs of those who cannot do for themselves and cannot do back for you, you will never lack. Another way of looking at it, doing for others is doing for self. You will never lack. If you want wellness, in your business, if you want wellness among your employees, if you want wellness among your family, if you want wellness among your relationships in business and social realities, give wellness. And guess what? Wellness will not lack. In this 21 days, now another 19 after today, in this 21 days, give an absolute certainty of wellness. Sometimes it's just in a smile for somebody who's not having a good day, right? Life is hard, but it's all good, right? While things are hard, we have the ability to give encouragement and value and edification, building up, enrichment that can transform people's lives. So if you're dealing with difficulty, one of the best things you can do is stop focusing on your difficulty and focus on somebody else's difficulty. Very last thing I'll say, man, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Major Payne. I'm not really a movie guy, but I've seen some movies, and certain things catch me in movies. I remember at the beginning of the movie, the man was shot and he was talking about his leg. "Oh, my leg. And Major Payne comes up. He said, I can take your mind off of your pain. Take your mind off the pain." He's like, "Oh, okay." So he goes and breaks the man's fingers or finger or something like that, twists it in a unique, weird way. And the dude literally stops crying about his leg and he starts crying about his fingers. Now, on the one hand, it's kind of sad, right? Sad in the sense of he didn't really help the dude, but sad in the sense that the guy, he was so focused on his pain that literally he just went from one pain to the next pain. Literally pain, because it was major pain. Anyway, on the other hand, it was good. Because there's a principle there that we can actually help to take people's minds off of the difficulty that is actually affecting them. Which means that when we engage, listen to me carefully, when we engage in giving generously, compassionately generous giving is the focus, what happens is when we focus on the difficulty of somebody else, we are taking our mind off of our difficulty, and we're really saying our difficulty is not so important that it would position us to actually disregard the difficulty of someone else. Now we position ourselves for our difficulty to be focused on, not just by us, yes, by us on the one hand, to where we can probably think more soberly about it, but we might even activate the generosity of somebody else in a way that we could never have imagined, which is somewhat of a mysterious and mystical reality. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. No, can't say that anymore. I have stopped saying it. I'll get off my podium. I get off my podium here and say, I want you to be well. That's why I say be well, because I want people to have wellness. Be well. And as I often say, be great. You hear me now? You take care.